Baby reindeer can help some men understand why women are picking the bear. Let's talk about it. The man versus bear hypothetical blew up across the internet a month or two ago, and it had some people quite upset.
This post made me reevaluate my idea of women being just as logical as men. Sad. Hopefully this is just the vocal minority of delusional women. That's the dumbest thing I've ever read. A bear will fucking kill you. Yeah, most bear attacks are provoked. Keyword most. The percentage of bears attacking unprovoked is still way higher than men. How many men have you walked past in your lifetime? Literally hundreds of thousands. If you walked past 100,000 bears, you would not survive to do so.
I really think you're missing the point here.
From my own experience, people who get upset about this hypothetical seem to take it personally. They envision themselves as the man in the woods, and they get upset when women say they would rather run into the bear. This line of thinking completely ignores the point of the hypothetical. While everyone, of course, has their own interpretations on why they themselves would pick the bear, I'd like to talk about some of the common themes I've seen in this discussion. The first common theme I've seen in this conversation is when you run into a bear, you know what's about to happen. Either it's going to be scared off by you, mind its own business, or kill you. On the other hand, for many women out there, if they run into a random man in the woods, they don't know if they're going to be stalked, assaulted, murdered, or maybe they'll just get a hello. I will definitely expand on this later. Another common theme I've seen in this conversation is you don't have to see the bear at family or work events.
Around 80% of SA incidents are perpetrated by someone the victim knows. This could be a friend, a family member, or a coworker. In any instance though, the victim will likely see their abuser again in the future.
In some cases, yes, the victim could tell their family and friends and be supported, have their attacker jailed, or at the very least, ostracized from their circles. But that's not always the case. Many times, people just don't believe victims. If you do a little bit of research into how many rape kits are sitting in police backlog untested, your jaw will drop.
The Congressional Research Service did a report on this exact topic, and they looked into the backlog of 911 U.S. counties and used that as a basis to generate a countrywide backlog estimate. The estimate concluded that there are around 300,000 to 400,000 kits sitting in law enforcement agencies waiting to be tested. Those kits all represent victims whose perpetrator still walks the streets, an abuser who's still welcome at family events, a friend who's still invited out for drinks, or a coworker who's still getting a paycheck.
All of this doesn't even address why victims might stay silent for a number of other reasons. Some of these are fear for their own safety, fear for their job, or fear from family ostracization. The last part of this conversation I want to explore today are a lot of the smaller bits that make up this conversation. These are ideas like I don't have to carry the bear's baby to term in certain states, or no one will say I was asking to be attacked by the bear, and no one will defend the bear by talking about its bright future. All of these are pieces of nuance that get completely ignored when certain men say, well, logically speaking, you should pick the man because the bear's gonna kill you. Shout out to this Redditor who actually seemed to understand what this hypothetical was trying to get at.
I'm gonna speculate here and say that most people who choose the bear wouldn't actually choose the bear, but are trying to make a point about the prevalence of sexual misconduct, which is, by the way, not something I'm trying to downplay.
So how does all of this relate to baby reindeer, and how can it help some men understand the gravity of this conversation? Let's get into it.
For those unaware, Baby Reindeer is a Netflix show that follows Donnie and his stalker Martha. Donnie is a struggling comedian who works at a bar, and one day, a woman walks into the bar and Donnie gives her a drink on the house out of pity. This starts a cycle that escalates and escalates over the course of many months. I'm not going to break down every bit of Baby Reindeer in this video in regards to the man versus bear question, although it could be done, just not in this video. This video is going to be much more of a discussion rather than a breakdown like most of my other videos tend to be. As I watched the show, I saw many examples of the issues that surround the bear hypothetical on full display. Let's talk about some of them.
Let's start with that first point I brought up, and this is definitely the point that is the least explored in Baby Reindeer, and I think a lot of that has to do with the flipping of the sexes in this situation.
Donnie is a man, and Martha, his stalker, is a woman. Donnie is also young and tall and reasonably fit. Martha is a decade older, much shorter, and she's not exactly someone you'd expect to see benching 225. Because of this dynamic, Donnie doesn't really seem to fear her in the she might murder me sense, but even still, Donnie doesn't know what Martha's going going to do next. Throughout the show, she keeps escalating things, leading to her sexually assaulting Donnie at one point, and she even moves on to harassing Donnie's parents. This includes calling his father's job and telling his co-workers that his dad is a pedo. This is the main way that Baby Reindeer shows off this issue.
The next major point I brought up is that women don't have to see the bear at family, work, or friend events.
Donnie is stalked to an insane degree by Martha throughout the show. She comes and sits at his bar for hours and hours every day that he works, and she even manages to get inside Donnie's home by befriending his landlord. Once Donnie tries to set a boundary with her, she proceeds to sit outside Donnie's home instead for hours a day. She is quite literally relentless. She shows up to his comedy shows and causes scenes. She emails him nonstop all day, every day, and she eventually leaves many voicemails after she gets her hands on his number.
The show likes to explore that Donnie enjoyed the attention to a degree, and it even dives into his own obsession with the situation as the show comes to an end, but even still, Martha is clearly a point of stress for Donnie and his life.
In many voiceovers throughout the show, Donnie will mention points of stress and fear about Martha and where she might show up next and what she might try to destroy in his life next. We get to see how this whole situation absolutely fucks with Donnie's day-to-day life, how he wonders what she'll do next and where she might show up. Donnie has no escape, just like many women with their own harassers and assaulters.
And finally, we have those smaller points I mentioned. Some of them don't apply due to the flipping of sexes, like Donnie doesn't have to carry Martha's baby. But many of those other pieces of nuance are still shown off in the show. One in particular that stood out to me was the way that Donnie's co-workers treat this whole situation.
Martha is clearly obsessed with her baby reindeer, and Donnie's co-workers just treat her and the situation like a joke. They even make things much worse early on in the show by taking Donnie's phone and emailing Martha about anal sex. It's not until Martha smashes Donnie's head with a glass that his coworkers begin to take her harassment and stalking seriously. Honestly, while watching the show, it was Donnie's coworkers who made me want to talk about this topic. The way they just don't care about and don't understand Donnie's predicament really dripped with Redditor who doesn't understand why a woman would pick the bear energy.
Another detail shown off about this situation is how Donnie views Martha. This relates to the whole, what about his bright future when talking about sexual assault? Again, not a perfect metaphor. For most victims, it's other people talking about the perpetrator's future, whereas with Donnie, it's very internalized with the way he views Martha, despite all the torment she's bringing into his life. Even still, it's a point that permeates discussions of sexual assault, and it's really not something that should matter. A rapist shouldn't have a bright future, sexual harassers should be reported to HR, and Martha should have been reported to the police far sooner, especially after she assaults Terry in the bar. Speaking of the police, another part of this conversation was highlighted through the way the police handle the situation.
Especially early on, the police don't really take Donnie seriously. Like with some of the other topics, part of the point of Baby Reindeer is to explore Donnie's mindset, and so one reason why they don't take him seriously is because he doesn't report the most intense parts of the stalking. We come to learn later in the show that a lot of that hesitance to report her has to do with a past assault Donnie experienced, and this highlights another part of the bear conversation. Victims might have a number of reasons for why they don't report their assaulter right away, or why they might never want to report them. Getting into every detail of why that might be is just impossible because every situation is unique, but a short list could include that they maybe live with their assaulter, and if the police don't do anything, then it could make things much worse for the victim. Maybe like Donnie, the victim has past trauma that keeps them from reporting it, or maybe the victim is gaslighted by those around them into not reporting the incident. Even when Donnie does report things, and serious things, the police tend to ignore him for a while. They eventually get involved, but it takes a while, and even still, some of the officers don't take Donnie seriously. This highlights some of the issues when it comes to women reporting sexual harassment or assault. In many cases, just like with Donnie, unless there's a certain line crossed in regards to receiving threats and things like that, the police can't do anything even if they wanted to.
Another point on this is that in some cases, the police just don't want to do anything. The issues we talked about where some people don't take assault, harassment, or stalking seriously is just as true with the police, if not more. ACAB. The sheer number of untested rape kits in the USA is proof of this enough. Test the kits, match the DNA, make the arrest. And yet they still don't. Sure, some of those cases might not have enough evidence, but that's not most of them in my opinion. I don't have any specific numbers backing up or proving this claim, but they're probably out there. Like I've mentioned, this is a shorter video and more of a conversation rather than a deep dive. All of these examples I've shown off aren't even all the examples in Baby Reindeer, and they're definitely not all of the pieces of nuance that might push a woman to say that she would pick the bear. But I at least think I've painted a picture here. Martha is obviously an extreme. 99% of guys are not like Martha, but a good chunk of that 99% do share traits with her. They might be 1%, 5%, or even 20% Martha. I've met these guys in my own life, and I'm sure all of you watching have met them as well. These are guys who are a bit too persistent, way too assuming, and guys who just can't take a fucking hint. The other day at my job, one of my coworkers was talking about how this girl he was helping was so into him and that he needed to go get her snap. I saw their interaction, and I'm gonna be honest, she was just trying to place an order and nothing more. Maybe I'm wrong in that particular instance, but it is kind of a stereotype that guys will take a smile or a woman being friendly as a sign of flirting and interest, when that's not necessarily the case. That example is obviously not very severe at all, but it does highlight the point I'm trying to make. A much more serious example from my personal life was someone I knew who was a 20% Martha. They didn't stalk people, but they did obsess, they couldn't take a hint from anyone, and they would twist every word and situation to fit their perspective on things. All of this led to a lot of stress for the person that this obsession was targeted towards. I'm not going to dive into the details and specifics of that situation for a number of reasons, but it concluded with me and my friends having to cut that person completely out of our lives. I could go on and on with examples on how certain actions make men 1% Martha, but honestly, just talk to any women in your life. I know a lot of women who have stories about guys making them uncomfortable, stories about guys who wouldn't take no for an answer or take a hint, and stories of them being sexually harassed and in some cases even assaulted. Quite literally, the day that I wrote this part of this script, I had a woman I know tell me a story about her being sexually harassed. Women are practically guaranteed to run into a 1% Martha at some point in their lives, and sadly for many of them, they'll run into a 5%, 20%, or even a 50% Martha. 81% of women report sexual harassment or violence at some point in their lifetime. And according to the CDC, 53% of women report sexual violence at some point in their lifetime. Those numbers are shockingly high and a huge indicator on this whole conversation. I'm pansexual, and so I've dated men a few times in my lifetime, and let me just say, I pick the bear. I've never been assaulted or anything close to that, but I've had many times where I'll be having a conversation on a dating app and then boom, dick pic. I've also had many other times where that's just the opener. Imagine what women have to deal with in regards to dating men on dating apps or even in real life. I've only experienced a fraction of what women have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and even still, I get worried about men when it comes to dating and stuff like that. I'm 6'1", 200 pounds, and could probably fight off anyone who was trying to assault me to any degree unless I was drugged or something like that, and even I have that underlying fear. The culture we live in cultivates this attitude. Guys are not born part Martha, but rather they're molded into that by our society. I can't get into this today because it would add 30 minutes to the runtime of this video, but the culture that we live in does revolve around men. Our culture in many ways teaches men to be 1%, 5%, or even 20% Marthas. It tells men that they must be the dominant provider and they must find a submissive wife who does whatever they say. It tells guys that women are asking for it if they wear anything slightly revealing. It ignores issues that permeate men's actions with statements like boys will be boys or he was just having some fun. It ignores real crimes through police inaction, the trivialization of incidents, and the focus on the perpetrator's future rather than the victim's well-being. I've really only scratched the surface on why women might choose the bear, and still that scratch shows so much. I think this is one quality that Baby Reindeer does really well. It highlights the reasons why someone might pick the bear. Even still, it doesn't show them all. I didn't even touch on how the various assaults that Donnie experiences affect his mental and how much trauma sexual assault can really leave on a person. If you're a guy who can't understand why women might pick the bear, I hope after watching this you can understand a little bit better. That's all the discussion I have on this topic for today. I felt pretty unqualified to talk about this, but I thought it was important and still wanted to. I found that Baby Reindeer could really show off to guys why women might pick the bear. We can talk about the stats all day, but I really feel like a story like Baby Reindeer can help some men understand. I will just say though, it is kind of ironic that it had to be a story about a man being harassed by a woman in order for some men to understand the gravity of what women have to deal with. That's not a dig at baby reindeer, it's just a little ironic. Thank you for watching. I've got some pretty big videos in the works. First will be a video for Pride Month, and then after that will be a breakdown on the Book of Mormon musical's satire. Subscribe for that, check out some of my other videos, and have a great day. See ya.